It began, as every morning did for Chief Peter Adabio, with the sound of motion pretending to be progress. The treadmill hummed under his feet like a tired machine remembering yesterday's defeat. Outside, dawn light spilled across his mansion's wide terrace, touching the river that curved lazily through McSurdy. A luxury view wasted on the lonely. The scent of polish and disinfectant filled the private gym. Expensive, cold, empty. Peter ran hard. Harder than most men half his age. He was not chasing fitness. He was escaping the stillness, running from the quiet grief that lingered in every room when his household slept. His body strained, lungs heaving, feet pounding in rhythm with an invisible sorrow. 17 years. For 17 long years, Chief Peter had chased a miracle for his daughter Princess. He had crossed oceans and time zones, flown doctors in private jets, and emptied wealth that others would worship as destiny. But no door opened for him. He had stood in gleaming hospital corridors in Zurich, Boston, Berlin, and Tokyo, clutching reports filled with brilliant, useless words. His child could not walk. Her legs were perfect, strong, straight, shapely, and yet lifeless. Every specialist had told him the same thing, their voices heavy with rehearsed compassion. Chief, her muscles and bones are flawless. There is no physical reason. It may be psychosomatic, a mind-body disconnect of unknown cause. It was the kind of answer that pretended to explain, but solved nothing. Each time, Peter felt the ground vanish beneath him. He could move markets with one call, make politicians bend, raise cities from empty sand, but none of it mattered because he could not make his own daughter stand. The irony bit deep. A ruler of men, powerless before one child's stillness. He slammed the treadmill button, the machine sputtering to a halt. Sweat poured down his face, leaving small dark circles on the pristine rubber tiles. He bent forward, gasping, his reflection trembling in the mirror. All those white coats, the faint scent of disinfectant, the echo of his footsteps walking away. It returned like a cruel ghost. Later that morning, he found Princess in the West Wing library. Her wheelchair faced a massive glass window framed by velvet curtains. Beyond it, the garden glowed in sunlight, butterflies above hibiscus blooms, a gardener moving slowly with his watering can. Dust motes floated in the beam of light, dancing lazily like tiny ghosts. She looked radiant. A quiet smile curved her lips, calm and certain, while her hair caught the sun's edge and glimmered. Princess had her father's eyes, but not his restlessness. She belonged to stillness, to serenity. She didn't look trapped in a chair. She looked at peace. "Good morning, Papa," she said softly, turning her head toward him. "Morning, my dear." He crossed to her, kissed her forehead, the warmth of her skin both comfort and cruelty. "Did you sleep well?" Her eyes sparkled with something alive, a secret perhaps. "I had the strangest dream," she said. "I dreamt I was standing right there, by the window. I could feel the carpet under my feet." Peter froze, his heart catching. He had heard this before, dozens of times. Flickers of false hope. The words of her dreams cut him deeper than the truth itself. "That's a lovely dream, Princess," he managed, forcing his mouth into a father's smile. He had performed the same act so long that even sadness had muscle memory. He stayed there a moment longer, pretending to admire the sunlight, pretending his heart wasn't breaking anew. The day stretched ahead. Meetings, policies, meaningless plans. He would run again tomorrow, until running became prayer. For Peter Adabio, miracles were long dead, only routine remained. Miles away, on the ragged outskirts of Makuri, life began differently. At dawn's first light, a harsh voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "Useless girl! Is the sun waiting for you to greet it?" Amaka startled awake, already kneeling on the hardened clay floor, scrubbing each stubborn patch until her fingers bled faintly. Her aunt Chidinma stood over her, hands on hips, the morning's scowl etched beneath her headscarf. The old woman's shadow stretched across the floor like a cage. Amaka said nothing. Words were dangerous. Silence was survival. To her aunt, she was not blood or blessing, just an extra mouth, a burden wrapped in skin. To the villagers, she was something stranger. The odd girl who could see things before they happened. A whispered word clung to her everywhere. Witch. She was an orphan. A fever had taken her parents years ago. All she remembered of them was warmth and laughter, two sounds that had no place in Auntie Chidinma's hut. By 13, Amaka had learned to read the moods of her aunt's footsteps and to vanish before the blows arrived. Yet inside her lived a quiet knowing, a sense of the seen and unseen. Sometimes she woke with flashes, images like pieces of a dream sliding into daylight. Sometimes when villagers fell ill, her hands seemed to move on their own, finding the right leaves, the right root. She never charged, never spoke of it. She helped quietly, as though obeying a law older than fear. But gratitude was not what people gave her. When a child she treated recovered, they hissed that she lifted her own curse. When she passed and a goat sneezed, they spat to ward off evil. She had become their mirror for every terror they did not understand. That afternoon, a neighbor's goat collapsed, its ribs heaving, foam at its mouth. The woman, desperate, found Amaka at the stream washing clothes. "Please," she begged, trembling. "Just help." Without a word, Amaka rose. The forest guided her steps. Her fingers brushed familiar leaves until they found a small vine bearing pale green flowers. She tore some, crushed them gently, mixing them in water until they became a thick, bitter paste. Returning to the goat, she opened its mouth, applying the mixture with careful hands while murmuring quiet words under her breath. Not spells, but calm. A warmth traveled from her palm to the animal's side. Slowly, its breathing softened. Its body relaxed. Life tiptoed back. Amaka didn't stay to witness the woman's relief. She simply wiped her hands on her skirt and walked away. Gratitude would never follow. That night, she pounded yam, sweat dripping from her brow, and the first spark of a new vision caught her mid-swing. A man in a dark suit whose face carried sorrow carved into its lines. A girl fixed in a chair with wheels instead of legs. A silver car glinting against city dust. The image vanished, but the strange pull it left behind did not. This vision was different. It felt like direction, like fate tugging gently at her sleeve. Over the next few days, the vision returned again and again, sharper each time. She saw buildings she had never seen before, tall and glassy. She saw the man's weary eyes, the girl's serene smile. She didn't understand it, but she could feel its purpose hardening like dawn after night. One evening, serving her aunt's dinner of bitter soup and yam, the vision slipped out of her mouth before fear could stop it. "I saw a man," she murmured, almost to herself. "A rich man. His daughter cannot walk." The slap came before the last word settled. "Witchcraft!" Auntie Chidinma hissed, her breath hot, eyes burning. "You dare bring evil into my house? Trying to bewitch a rich man to rescue you, eh? Filthy girl!" Amaka stumbled back, her cheek flaming. She whispered an apology that changed nothing. Silence was her safest friend again. But the images would not stop. And the next one, oh, the next one was worse. The following morning, while drawing water at the communal well, another vision struck her so violently she almost dropped the bucket. She saw Chief Isa, the village elder, clutch his chest, eyes wide, and crumble to the ground. The sensation was intense, bright, real. She ran, feet flying over the dirt path, heart pounding. She found the chief's son mending a fishing net. "Your father," she gasped. "Please, check on him. I saw him fall, his heart." The man looked up, his expression sour. He had heard the rumors. To him she wasn't human, just bad luck that had learned to walk. "Get away from me, witch." He spat. "Don't bring your darkness to my home." Amaka's voice trembled. "Please, I'm not lying." He turned away. She walked to the stream, the sound of her own breath louder than the water rushing by. Her chest ached with helplessness. She prayed she had seen wrong, that maybe the visions were cruelty, not destiny. But deep down, she knew truth when it came. An hour later, screams shattered the noon silence. Men ran through the village. Women wailed. Chief Isa was dead, struck by a sudden massive heart attack in his chair, the radio still murmuring beside him. Fear swept the village like harmattan dust. Whispers became shouts, shouts became accusation. The chief's son stormed into the square, tears streaking his face, finger trembling as he pointed at her. "She did this," he cried. "She came to me, spoke of his death, and now he is gone. The witch killed him with her eye." The crowd erupted. Fear turned feverish. "Witch! Witch!" they chanted, voices merging into a dark wave. Superstition had found its sacrifice, and through the frenzy stepped Auntie Chidinma, arms crossed, her face alight with grim triumph. She had been waiting for this moment. She pointed a rigid finger at the girl who had once called her auntie, and shouted the loudest of them all, fanning the fire until it burned bright and merciless. "I have housed this demon for years," she cried, playing the part of the long-suffering victim. "She brings darkness wherever she goes. She must be cast out before she destroys us all." A makeshift council of elders, men whose authority was built on tradition and fear, convened under the old mango tree. They did not deliberate. They listened to the mob. Amaka was dragged before them, her arms held tightly. She said nothing. There were no words that could penetrate their wall of certainty. The verdict was swift banishment. She was to leave immediately with only the worn dress on her back. To remain was to risk being stoned. They drove her from the village with insults and thrown pebbles. Auntie Chidinar watched from her doorway, a cruel smile on her lips. Amaka did not look back. She walked down the dusty road leading away from the only home she had ever known, each step taking her further into an uncertain future. She was hungry. Her cheeks still throbbed from her auntie's slap, and a profound loneliness settled over her. But as she walked, one image held steady in her mind. The sad-eyed man in the black suit and his daughter in the wheelchair. The vision was no longer a mystery. It was a compass. It was the only thing she had left. Chief Peter hated the park. He hated the cheerful laughter of running children, and the sight of families sharing snacks on checkered blankets. It was a world his daughter could only observe. But Princess loved the open space, the scent of the hibiscus flowers, and the feeling of the sun on her face. So once a month he endured it for her. He sat on a bench while Princess's nurse, a stout, kind woman named Elizabeth, pushed the wheelchair slowly along the paved path. He tried to read the newspaper, but the words blurred. His mind kept replaying Princess's dream. I was standing. It was a cruel trick of the mind, a flicker of hope in a place he had sealed off long ago. His gaze drifted across the lawn and settled on a girl sitting alone under a flame tree. She was thin and ragged, her dress frayed at the hem. She wasn't begging, just sitting, watching the world with an unnerving stillness. There was a quiet dignity about her that felt out of place with her obvious poverty. He felt a sudden, inexplicable tug of compassion. It was an old instinct, one he rarely acted on anymore. He folded his newspaper, stood up, and walked over to a nearby vendor selling meat pies and bottled water. He bought 2 of each. He approached the girl. She looked up as he neared, her eyes clear and direct. They held no fear, no plea. "You look hungry," he said, his voice gruff. He held out the food and water. The girl Amaka took them with a soft, "Thank you, sir." He also pulled a few crisp Naira notes from his pocket and pressed them into her hand. "Get yourself a proper meal." He expected a flood of gratitude, perhaps a blessing. He received neither. He turned to walk back to his bench, his duty done. "Sir." Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the park's ambient noise and stopped him cold. He turned back. She had stood up and was looking past him, her gaze fixed on Princess's wheelchair, now stopped by the fountain. "Your daughter," Amaka said, her tone calm and certain, as if stating a fact of nature, like the sun rises in the east. "I can make her walk." The words struck Chief Peter with the force of a physical blow. He felt a surge of anger. How dare this street urchin mock his deepest pain? He opened his mouth to deliver a sharp rebuke to dismiss her as a charlatan or a madwoman. But he stopped. He looked from Amarker's clear, unwavering eyes to his daughter by the fountain. He remembered her words from that morning. "I dreamt he was standing." Coincidence? It was just a cruel coincidence. And yet he had listened to the world's most celebrated medical minds. He had followed their advice, paid their exorbitant fees, and received nothing but apologies. This ragged girl offered no credentials, no scientific theory. She offered only an impossible promise. What did he have to lose? His hope was already dead. His dignity had been eroded by years of failed treatments. All that was left was a sliver of a father's desperate love. "How?" he asked, the single word raspy. "I've been sent to you," Amaka replied simply. It was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. It was also the only thing that had broken through his routine of despair in years. Against all logic, against every rational instinct that possessed, Chief Peter made a decision. "Get in the car," he said. The journey to Chief Peter's estate was a silent one. Amaka sat in the back of the air-conditioned car, the leather cool against her skin, and watched the bustling city of McCurdy rush past. It was exactly like her vision. When they arrived, massive wrought iron gates swung open to reveal a sprawling compound. The house was less a home and more a palace, white and imposing, surrounded by manicured lawns and towering palm trees. Uniformed guards stood at attention, their faces stern. As Amaka stepped out of the car, she was met with a wall of suspicion. 2 guards, their bodies tense, escorted her inside. The head of security, a severe man named Mr. Chick, frisked her thoroughly, his hands firm and impersonal. He found nothing but the crumpled Naira notes Chief Peter had given her. The staff gathered in the grand marble entryway, their eyes wide with curiosity and distrust. They saw a dirty, ragged girl brought into their pristine world. They whispered amongst themselves, "Who was she?" "A distant relative, a new charity case." Princess was wheeled forward by her nurse. She looked at Amarker with gentle, searching eyes. A hint of fear mixed with anent hope. Dr. Bayo, the in-house physician, rushed to Chief Peter's side, his voice a low, urgent protest. "Chief, this is highly irregular. We have no idea who this girl is. She could be carrying anything. We must run tests. Quarantine. Chief Peter held up a hand, silencing him. His own doubt was a roaring sea in his mind, but he had already crossed a line. There was no turning back. She is my guest doctor, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. She will be treated with respect. He turned to Amaka. The entire household was watching, waiting. The air was thick with tension. What do you need? He asked. Amaka's gaze drifted past the polished floors and expensive art. She looked through the large glass doors at the back of the hall toward the lush, sprawling gardens. The solution, she said softly, is in your garden. This statement, so simple and so strange, hung in the air. Mr. Chick's hand instinctively moved toward the weapon at his hip. Dr. Barco scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. Chief Peter simply stared at her, this strange, calm girl who had turned his world upside down in the span of an hour. Show me, he commanded. They followed her outside into the meticulously curated garden. A team of gardeners kept the lawns perfect, the flower beds vibrant, and the hedges sculpted. It was a place of controlled artificial beauty. Amaka walked past rows of exotic roses and imported orchids. She ignored the vibrant, attention-seeking blossoms. Her eyes scanned the edges of the manicured beds, the places where order met the wilder, untamed earth. She moved with a quiet purpose, her bare feet silent on the soft grass. The staff followed at a distance, a procession of skeptics. Dr. Barco muttered about poisonous plants and local superstitions. Princess watched from the patio, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. Finally, Amaka stopped. She pointed to a spot near the base of a large stone wall partially hidden by an overgrown fern. A small, unassuming plant was growing there with tough, heart-shaped leaves and a stem that was barely visible. It was the kind of plant the gardeners would have dismissed as a weed. This one, she said. She knelt and began to dig into the soft, damp earth with her bare hands. She worked carefully, loosening the soil around the plant's base. After a moment, she pulled a root from the ground. It was reddish-brown, gnarled, and twisted about the length of her hand. It looked like nothing special. She stood and held it out on her palm. This is what we need. Dr. Barco stepped forward, his face a mask of professional outrage. Chief, you cannot be serious. We don't know what this is. It could be toxic, even fatal. To administer an unknown substance is malpractice. It is madness. The doctor's words resonated with the fear in the air. The guards shifted their weight. The housemaids whispered more urgently. He was the voice of science, of reason. Amaka was the voice of something else entirely. Chief Peter looked at the root in Amaka's hand, then at his daughter. He saw the flicker of hope in Princess's eyes, a light he hadn't seen in years. He had trusted science. He had trusted experts and their machines and their carefully controlled trials. And for 17 years, science had failed him. He turned to his daughter. Princess, he said, his voice softer than anyone had heard it in a long time. What do you want to do? Everyone looked at the girl in the wheelchair. The weight of the moment settled on her. She looked at Dr. Bio's fearful face, at her father's tormented one, and finally at Amaka's calm, steady gaze. I want to try, Princess said, her voice clear and firm. I choose courage. The decision was made. The household staff was ordered to bring a pot, a knife, and fresh water to the kitchen. Under Amaka's quiet direction, the reddish root was washed, chopped into small pieces, and set to boil on the stove. A bitter, earthy smell soon filled the air, a strange and wild scent in the sterile, modern kitchen. Dr. Bia stood by armed with a medical kit, ready to treat for poisoning. He took samples of the root and the boiling liquid, already planning the toxicology reports. Mr. Chike had 2 guards stationed at the kitchen door, as if the simmering pot were a security threat. When the decoction had cooled, it was a dark, murky tea. Amaka poured it into a simple glass. She carried it into the living room where Princess waited with her father. You must drink it all, Amaka said softly to Princess, and then you must sleep. Do not be afraid of the sleep. It is part of the healing. Princess took the glass, her hand steady. She looked at her father, who gave her a single sharp nod. He was terrified, but he would not let his daughter see it. She lifted the glass to her lips and drank the bitter liquid without flinching. She finished the last drop and handed the empty glass back to Amaka. It tastes like the earth, she said with a small smile. Nothing happened. For a few minutes, they all sat in silence. Then, a visible wave of drowsiness washed over Princess. Her eyelids grew heavy, her head nodded forward. Within 10 minutes, she was deeply asleep in her wheelchair. Her nurse and father carefully lifted her and carried her to her bed. And so the waiting began. Princess slept through the rest of the day and into the night. Dr. Barco checked her vitals every hour. They were stable. Her breathing was deep and even. She was, by all medical standards, perfectly fine. She was simply profoundly asleep. The first night was the longest of Chief Peter's life. He sat in a chair by his daughter's bedside, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Doubt, which he had held at bay, came crashing back in. What had he done? He had entrusted his only child to a strange girl with a root from the garden. He had abandoned reason for a moment of desperate, magical thinking. The next day, Princess was still asleep. The tension in the mansion grew thicker. The staff's whispers turned from suspicious to fearful. Had the witch girl put the master's daughter under a spell? Was this a curse? Chief Peter found Amaka sitting quietly on the patio looking out at the garden. She seemed completely untroubled by the unfolding drama. "She is still sleeping," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Nothing is happening." Amaka turned to him, her expression serene. "Sir, something has already happened," she said. The miracle did not begin when she drank the medicine. It began in the park, the moment you chose to be kind to a hungry stranger. You fed a girl who had been rejected. The rest is just obedience. This is a trial of faith, not a medical procedure. Her words offered a strange comfort. He had been focusing on the outcome, on the result. Amaka was framing it as a process that had started with him, an act of grace he hadn't even recognized. He stayed with her for a while, the two of them sitting in silence as the sun began to set on the second day of waiting. On the third day, the first subtle signs appeared. The nurse, Elizabeth, was adjusting Princess's blankets when she touched her feet. For as long as she had cared for the girl, her feet had always been cool to the touch, a result of poor circulation from years of inactivity. But now she felt a distinct warmth. It was a small thing, easily dismissed, but Elizabeth had been with Princess for a decade. She knew. She quietly reported it to Chief Peter, her voice hushed with a hesitant wonder. Later that afternoon, Princess murmured in her sleep. Her father, sitting by her bed, leaned closer. He heard a single word, running. A tear traced a path through the exhaustion on his face. She was dreaming of movement. The atmosphere in the mansion began to shift. The hostility toward Amaka softened, replaced by a tentative curiosity. The starve, who had initially avoided her, now watched her from a distance with a new respect. She wasn't a witch casting a spell. She was a quiet girl, waiting patiently for a promise to be fulfilled. They saw that she asked for nothing. She ate the simple meals the cook prepared for her. Adichie slept on the small bed in the guest room she was given, and spent most of her time in the garden, her presence calm and unobtrusive. Her humility was disarming. Chief Peter found himself seeking her out. They would sit on the patio, not always talking, but sharing a quiet space of anticipation. He told her about Princess, about the years of failed treatments and his own knowing despair. She listened, her gaze compassionate. She told him her name, Amaka. "It means God is beautiful," had translated a flicker of his old self returning. "My mother gave it to me," she said. She spoke of her village, not with bitterness, but with a sad understanding. "They were afraid. Fear makes people cruel. They called me a witch because they did not have a name for what I could do." "And what is it that you do?" he asked gently. "I listen," she said, "and I obey. I was sent to you. My part was to deliver the message. Your part was to feed me. Her part was to drink. Now we'll wait." Her simple theology cut through his complex world of finance and logic. He was a man who controlled outcomes, who bent the world to his will. Now he was being asked to simply wait, to surrender control. In the quiet of those waiting days, as hope rekindled in the house like a slow-burning ember, Chief Peter began to feel a strange sense of peace. The weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. He was no longer carrying it alone. On the fourth morning, the mansion was still. The sun cast long shadows across the lawns. In the kitchen, the staff moved quietly, preparing for another day of waiting. Chief Peter had finally drifted into a restless sleep in the chair beside his daughter's bed. At precisely 7:42 a.m., Princess's eyes opened. They were clear and alert. She was not drowsy or confused. She was fully, completely awake. She looked at her sleeping father, then at the sunlight streaming through her window, and then she felt something she had never felt before. It was an urge, a command originating deep in her muscles. It was not a thought or a wish, but a physical imperative. "Stand up." She pushed the covers aside. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her bare feet touched the soft, cool surface of the Persian rug. For 17 years this action would have been followed by nothing. Her legs would have remained useless appendages, unable to receive the signals from her brain. But this time was different. She pushed down with her hands and shifted her weight forward. She felt the muscles in her thighs and calves tense, engaging in a way they never had. She felt the floor solid and real beneath the soles of her feet. Slowly, unsteadily, she rose. Her legs trembled violently from the unfamiliar strain, but they held. She was standing. For the first time in her life, she was bearing her own weight. Papachi whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Chief Peter's eyes snapped open. He saw her. He wasn't dreaming. His daughter was standing beside her bed. He shot to his feet, his heart pounding against his ribs, a wild, disbelieving joy flooding every part of him. Princess took a step. It was clumsy, a lurching motion. She took another, then another. She was walking, moving across the room toward him. Tears were streaming down both their faces. She stumbled, her legs giving way, and fell forward into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight, burying his face in her hair. He was sobbing. Great wrenching sounds of grief and gratitude and 17 years of pent-up pain being released all at once. The nurse, Elizabeth, had walked in toe check on her patient and stood frozen in the doorway, her hands covering her mouth, silent tears tracking down her plump cheeks. Her gasp alerted the rest of the house. Soon the room was filled with the staff, guards, cooks, maids, gardeners. They crowded the doorway, their faces a canvas of shock, awe, and disbelief. Dr. Barco pushed his way through, his scientific mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. The girl who could not walk was standing, held in her father's arms. The mansion, so long a place of quiet, ordered despair, erupted in a chorus of joyful, incredulous noise. The impossible had happened. In the joyful chaos that followed, Chief Peter's first instinct was to reward Amaka. He was a man who understood transactions. A service was rendered. A payment was made. He found her in the garden, calmly tending to the small patch of earth where she had found the root. Amaka, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He was still trying to process the reality of holding his walking daughter. Anything. You can have anything you want. A house. Money for the rest of your life. A scholarship to any school in the world. Name it, it's yours. He expected her to be overwhelmed. Perhaps Shilly asked for a small sum. He was prepared to give her a fortune. Amaka looked up from the soil, her hands dirty. She considered his offer, her expression thoughtful. You have already given me what I needed, she said. You gave me food when I was hungry and shelter when I was abandoned. No, I insisted. That was nothing. What you have done for my family, it cannot be measured. I must give you something. She stood and wiped her hands on her dress. She looked him directly in the eye, her gaze steady. There is one thing, she said. It is not something you can buy. What is it? I want my name back, she said simply. Chief Peter frowned, confused. I don't understand. In my village, she explained, her voice even without a trace of self-pity. They do not call me Amaka. They call me a witch. They banished me. They believe I am a curse. I want them to know the truth. I want you to tell them. He was stunned. She was asking not for riches, but for restoration, for dignity, for the public truth to silence the private lies. In his world of assets and acquisitions, it was a currency he had almost forgotten. It was the most profound and the most humbling request he had ever received. He realized then that the miracle was not just for his daughter. It was for him, and it was for this girl. I will do more than that, he said, his voice ringing with a new and absolute conviction. The whole country will hear your name, I promise you. A few days later, Chief Peter called a press conference. The gardens of his estate swarmed with reporters and television crews, drawn by the sensational rumor that the billionaire's daughter had been miraculously cured. He stood at a podium with Princess on one side and Amaka on the other. He began by telling the whole story, the 17 years of failure, the global search for a cure, his own surrender to despair. Then he shared what he saw as his own turning point. The cure did not begin with a doctor, he said, his voice booming through the speakers. It began when I performed a simple act of kindness for a hungry girl in a park without expecting anything in return. He then introduced Amaka, not as a healer or a mystic, but as the catalyst. He told them her story, how she had been mislabeled, feared, and cast out by her community. When Amaka stepped to the microphone, a hush fell over the crowd. She was dressed in a simple new dress, but her demeanor was unchanged. She was calm, grounded, and unafraid. I am not educated, she began, her voice clear and steady. I have no money and no important family. The people of my village called me a witch because they were afraid. Today, I am not here to blame them. I am here to speak to all the people who have been rejected, mislabeled, or thrown away. You are not a curse. Your life has a purpose. She turned and smiled at Princess, who took her hand. The image of the two girls, one born to privilege, the other to poverty, united by a miracle, was broadcast across the nation. The press conference sent shockwaves through the country, and nowhere did they hit harder than in Amaka's former village. The people who had spat her name now saw her on television standing beside one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. They saw the beautiful, healthy princess holding her hand. They heard Chief Peter's story. Shame fell upon the village like a heavy blanket. Chief Ez's son avoided the eyes of his neighbors. The elders who had condemned her fell silent. And Auntie Chidma, who had been the architect of Amaka's exile, found herself isolated. The whispers that had once followed Amaka now turned on her. She was Theon who was shunned, her cruelty now exposed for all to see. True to his word, Chief Peter funded a full education for Amaka, enrolling her in one of the best schools in McCurdy. He didn't adopt her or try to turn her into another version of princess. He gave her space, protection, and the tools to build her own future, honoring the unique person she was. But his transformation went deeper. Inspired by Amaka's request, he launched the Amaka Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to finding and supporting gifted misfits, young people with unusual talents and abilities who didn't fit conventional molds. It was a foundation not for the privileged, but for the outcasts, the misunderstood, and the rejected. Weeks later, grounded in her new life, Amaka had not changed. One afternoon, she visited a small local clinic funded by her foundation. A young boy was crying, his arm broken in a fall, terrified of the doctors and the strange-smelling room. Amaka sat with him. She didn't use a mysterious route or have a vision. She simply spoke to him in a soft, calm voice, telling him a story about a brave little goat. She held his hand, her touch steady and reassuring. The boy's crying subsided. He allowed the doctor to set his arm without a struggle. It was a small act, quiet and unnoticed by the world. But it was the truest expression of her gift. She was a healer, not of the body, but of the fear that grips the heart. This time she was helping not as an outcast in the shadows, but as a young woman of dignity, by her own choice. The story of the girl in the garden became a quiet legend. It served as a powerful reminder that the most profound changes are often unlocked not by power, status, or science, but by the simple catalytic force of compassion. It shows that truth given time will always silence fear, and that faith often requires obedience long before results are seen. It is a story of hope, redemption, and the extraordinary power of a single act of kindness.